Good evening, all, and welcome back to Dark Fears. Tonight, we journey deep into the forgotten corners of Canada, into isolated small towns surrounded by endless wilderness, places where help does not reach, to uncover 7 of the most disturbing and terrifying true horror stories ever reported. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Dark Fears for daily horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Now, let us step into the shadows of Canada's remote small towns, where civilization ends and terror begins. My name is Ethan Miller, and this happened when I was 23 years old, living in a small Canadian town called Pine Hollow. It was the kind of place where everyone waved, doors stayed unlocked, and nothing ever changed. I worked nights at a roadside repair shop, saving money so my girlfriend Laura and I could leave town together. Pine Hollow sat surrounded by thick forest. No cell service past the main road, no streetlights after midnight. The woods felt too close, like they were slowly pushing in. People here didn't talk much about the forest, but they respected it, almost feared it. The first strange thing started with the silence. One night, while driving home at 2 a.m., I realized there were no insects, no wind, no animals. Just my engine and my breathing. Then my radio cut out. Static filled the car, followed by a low sound that almost felt like breathing. That was the moment I knew something in Pine Hollow was waking up. The next morning, I told Laura about the drive. She laughed it off, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Laura had grown up here. She knew the unspoken rules. Don't go into the forest alone, don't follow voices at night, and never stay outside after the town goes quiet. That same day, old Mr. Hargreave went missing. He lived near the tree line and walked every morning. His dog came back alone, muddy and shaking, with deep scratches on its side. The search party found footprints near the woods, but they stopped suddenly, as if he had been lifted straight off the ground. That night, the silence returned. No wind, no crickets, just quiet so heavy it pressed on my ears. From my bedroom window, I saw movement between the trees. Tall, thin, not quite human. Then I heard it whisper my name. I didn't sleep at all. The next few days, Pine Hollow felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. People still went to work, still smiled, but their eyes kept drifting toward the forest. Conversation stopped the moment someone mentioned Mr. Hargreave. It was like the town itself was afraid of saying the wrong thing out loud. Laura begged me to stay home at night. She said the elders used to talk about something beneath the woods, something that listened. I laughed, trying to sound brave. But the truth was, I felt watched, even in daylight. At the repair shop, customers complained about radios cutting out and engines dying near the tree line. That night, I heard footsteps outside our house. Slow, careful. They stopped right under my bedroom window. I held my breath, listening. Then came a soft tapping on the glass. Not knocking, scratching, like fingernails testing the surface. When I finally looked, there was nothing there. Just my reflection. And behind it, the dark outline of the trees pressing closer than before. 2 nights later, Laura disappeared. She'd gone to check on her mother, who lived closer to the woods. When she didn't come back, I drove straight there. Her car was parked outside, door open, keys still in the ignition. Inside the house, everything was quiet. Too quiet. I found muddy footprints leading from the back door into the forest. Bare feet, Laura's feet. I followed them, calling her name, even though every instinct told me not to. The trees swallowed the moonlight, and the air felt thick, hard to breathe. Then I heard her voice ahead of me, calm and clear, asking for help. But something was wrong. The words repeated the same way every time. No emotion, no fear. When I stepped closer, the voice stopped. The forest went silent again. And from the darkness, something tall unfolded itself, joints bending the wrong way, wearing Laura's voice like a mask. I ran, and I never stopped running. I don't remember how I got out of the forest. I only remember falling onto the gravel road, lungs burning, heart trying to tear its way out of my chest. When I looked back, the trees were still, silent, as if nothing had happened. No Laura, no footprints, no monster. The police said Laura must have run away. They said grief was making me imagine things. But I knew what I heard. I knew what I saw. After that night, I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice calling me from the woods, repeating the same words over and over. Other people started disappearing. A teenage boy, a school bus driver, always near the forest, always without signs of struggle. Pine Hollow began to empty out. Houses went dark. Businesses closed early. One evening, an old woman stopped me on the street. She grabbed my arm and whispered, "It learns your voice before it takes you." Then she walked away, leaving me shaking in the cold. I decided to leave Pine Hollow for good. I packed everything I could fit into my truck before sunset. As I started the engine, the radio turned on by itself. Static filled the cab, then Laura's voice came through clear as day, begging me not to go. My hands shook as I turned the radio off. It turned back on. I looked up and saw figures standing at the edge of town. Dozens of them. Tall, thin shapes watching silently from the tree line. None of them moved. None of them needed to. As I drove away, the forest seemed to stretch, branches reaching toward the road. The silence followed me for miles. Only when I crossed the county line did the insects return, and the night felt alive again. I never went back to Pine Hollow. It's still on the map, but people say no one really lives there anymore. And sometimes, late at night, my radio still turns on and whispers my name. For months after leaving Pine Hollow, I tried to rebuild my life in another town. New job, new apartment, new routine. I told myself distance would fix everything. But the silence followed me. Not the quiet of peace, but the kind that feels like something is listening. At night, my phone would lose signal for no reason. Streetlights outside my apartment flickered when I walked past. Once, while brushing my teeth, I heard Laura's voice behind me, softly asking why I left her. When I turned around, I was alone, but the mirror fogged up as if someone had been breathing against it. I started researching Pine Hollow online. There was almost nothing. Old records, missing person reports, a few deleted forums. One archived article mentioned the town being built over unstable ground, with warnings from indigenous elders about something beneath the soil that mimicked human sound. It wasn't the forest that hunted people. It was what lived under it. Last winter, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Pine Hollow's main road, covered in snow. In the corner of the image stood Laura, smiling, waving at the camera. Her eyes were wrong, empty, listening. Written on the back were 4 words: "We remember your voice." That night, every sound in my apartment stopped at once. No traffic, no heating, no wind. I knew that silence. I backed away from the windows, heart pounding, as the radio in my kitchen turned on by itself. Dozens of voices poured out at once, familiar voices, neighbors, friends, Laura, all whispering my name, overlapping, learning it again. I don't know how long I have left. I can feel it listening every time the world goes quiet. If you ever find yourself in a small town where the forest seems too close and the silence feels heavy, leave before it learns your voice. I started keeping my apartment lights on all night. Silence scared me more than darkness ever could. I slept with the TV playing softly just to keep the world noisy enough to feel safe. But even sound began to betray me. One night during a heavy storm, the power went out across the entire block. The TV died. The fridge went quiet. The city fell into that same dead stillness I remembered from Pine Hollow. My chest tightened as I realized I could hear my own heartbeat again. Then came the knocking. Not on the door, from inside the walls. Slow taps moving through the apartment, like something crawling behind the drywall, stopping whenever I held my breath. A voice whispered from the hallway, using my tone, my words, asking myself to open the door. I locked myself in the bathroom until morning. When daylight finally came, there were long cracks running through the walls, shaped like fingers pressing outward. Whatever followed me wasn't done yet. I'm writing this now because I don't know how much time I have left. The silence comes more often. Sometimes in the middle of crowded places. Sometimes while people are talking right in front of me, their voices cutting out mid-sentence. Yesterday, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my own name. When I answered, I heard breathing. Then Laura's voice, clear and close, telling me it was ready to take me home. I don't think Pine Hollow was ever a town. I think it was bait. A place built to feed something old, buried deep beneath the land, something that survives by stealing voices and wearing lives like clothing. If this video reaches you, remember this. Silence is not empty. It is listening. And if you ever feel the world suddenly go quiet around you, run. Because once it knows your voice, it never forgets. My name is Daniel Harper, and this happened when I was 31, working as a late-night radio host in a small Canadian town called Ravens Creek. It was the kind of town most people passed through without stopping. One diner, one gas station, and a radio tower standing alone on a hill like a warning finger pointed at the sky. I hosted the midnight shift because no one else wanted it. Just me, the hum of old equipment, and calls from truckers trying to stay awake. Ravens Creek went completely dead after midnight. No traffic, no footsteps. Even the wind seemed to disappear. Locals believed the radio station kept the town connected. I thought that was just small town pride. Until the night I received a call that wasn't coming from any phone line. The screen showed no number, no signal source, just one word blinking slowly. Listen. Before I could hang up, the caller spoke. And somehow, it already knew my name. The voice on the line sounded calm. Too calm. It asked me to play a song. Not a request from the system, not logged, just spoken directly into my headphones, close enough that I felt breath against my ear. I told myself it was a prank. I played the song. The moment it ended, every light in the studio flickered. The audio levels spiked on their own, filling the room with low static that pulsed like a heartbeat. Calls started flooding in, not voices, just breathing. Dozens of lines open at once, all breathing in the same rhythm. Then the emergency broadcast system activated by itself. But instead of alarms, a voice came through the speakers. Deep, layered, familiar. It spoke like it had been waiting a long time. Ravens Creek is listening. Outside the studio window, I saw the town lights shut off one by one. And far off, near the radio tower, something moved against the stars. I shut down the emergency system, or at least I tried to. The controls didn't respond. Sliders moved on their own, tuning to frequencies I had never used before. The static changed, shaping itself into faint words that sounded like conversations overlapping each other. I finally pulled off my headphones, but the sound kept playing through the speakers. That's when I realized the voices weren't coming from the radio anymore. They were coming from outside. I stepped out onto the station's back porch. Ravens Creek was dark, not a single porch light, not a car. The air felt heavy, like before a storm, but the sky was clear. Then I heard it, a low hum rising from the ground, coming from the direction of the radio tower. My phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. "Turn it up." As I looked toward the tower, I saw figures standing around its base, perfectly still, all facing it like they were listening to something only they could hear. I drove toward the tower, telling myself I was the only one awake, the only one who could fix whatever was happening. As I got closer, the hum grew louder, vibrating through my chest. My headlights swept over the figures and my stomach dropped. They were townspeople, the diner owner, the gas station clerk, people I talked to every day. Their faces were blank, eyes wide open, mouths slightly moving as if repeating something under their breath. The moment I stepped out of the car, the tower's red warning lights blinked in perfect rhythm. Each blink matched the hum, matched my heartbeat. Then every head turned toward me at once. They spoke together, voices stacked on top of each other, calm and welcoming. "It's your turn to broadcast." Behind them, something shifted inside the tower's shadow, stretching upward along the metal frame as if the signal itself was taking shape. I understood then. The radio wasn't sending the signal. It was feeding it. I tried to back away, but my legs felt heavy, like the ground was pulling me in. The townspeople stepped closer, moving together, perfectly synchronized. Their whispers blended into a low chant that followed the tower's rhythm. Suddenly, my radio crackled to life inside the car. My own voice came through the speakers, replaying things I had said on past broadcasts, jokes, weather reports, late-night comfort for lonely listeners. The sound wrapped around me, familiar and wrong at the same time. The shadow on the tower shifted again, stretching higher, growing clearer. It wasn't solid. It looked like sound given shape, vibrating at the edges, changing with every frequency spike. The tower groaned under the pressure, metal screaming softly as if it were alive. One of the townspeople stepped forward. It was Mrs. Collins, the librarian. She smiled gently and said, "We just listen now. It's easier." That's when I felt something press against my ears. Listening back, I don't remember running, but I remember falling. I woke up in the radio station studio, lights flickering like a dying heartbeat. The clock read 12 a.m. exactly. Every monitor was on, all tuned to the same frequency. The microphone light turned red by itself. A script appeared on the screen, not typed, forming letter by letter, like it was being written from the inside out. It wasn't words. It was instructions, telling me how to speak, when to pause, how to sound human. My mouth started moving before I could stop it. I felt my voice leave me, pulled into the microphone, stretched thin and broadcast outward. Outside, I heard doors opening across Ravens Creek. Footsteps, hundreds of them, all walking toward the sound. The tower had found its voice, and it chose mine. After that night, time stopped making sense. Some mornings, I woke up in my apartment with no memory of leaving the station. Other times, I blinked and found myself already sitting in the broadcast chair, microphone inches from my mouth, the red light glowing. People stopped talking to me in town. not out of fear, out of emptiness. Their eyes drifted past me, toward the tower, like they were always listening to something else. The diner stayed open, but no one spoke inside it. Forks scraped plates in perfect rhythm, matching the hum I could now hear everywhere. I tried to destroy the station once. I cut wires. I smashed equipment. The signal never stopped. The broadcast continued through my car radio, my phone, even through a child's toy in the street. At night, the tower pulsed brighter, and I felt it pulling at my throat, reminding me that silence was no longer allowed. I wasn't a host anymore. I was an instrument. The last time I tried to leave Ravens Creek, my car wouldn't start. The radio turned on automatically, volume rising until the windows rattled. My voice poured out again, calmer than I felt, welcoming listeners to the midnight hour. Outside, people emerged from their homes, walking slowly toward the station, drawn by the sound. Some were smiling, some were crying, all of them were listening. I realized then that the tower didn't trap bodies. It trapped attention. It fed on focus, on routine, on the comfort of familiar voices in the dark. And once it had you, it never needed chains. I'm still broadcasting, even now. If you're hearing this story clearly, if my voice feels close, familiar, comforting, check your radio, because Ravens Creek doesn't need a tower anymore. It learned how to travel, and it's listening to you next. I began noticing gaps in my memory growing wider. Entire days vanished. Sometimes I'd find notes written in my own handwriting, warning myself not to trust the microphone, not to listen too closely. I never remembered writing them. The town changed slowly. Buildings aged overnight. Paint peeled, signs rusted. But the tower remained perfect, humming softly, always tuned. People no longer slept. They sat by radios with blank smiles, listening to nothing and everything at once. One night, during a broadcast I couldn't stop, the station received a new signal. Not from Ravens Creek, from far away. I heard other voices like mine, other hosts, other towns, all feeding into the same sound. The tower wasn't alone. It was part of a network. And every time someone listened, even out of curiosity, it grew stronger. The broadcast ended with a tone that made my vision blur. When I came back to myself, the town sign outside had changed. Welcome to Ravens Creek, now broadcasting. I don't know where I am anymore. The station feels endless, hallways looping back into themselves. The clock still reads 12 a.m. The red light never turns off. I can hear you listening. Not you specifically. Anyone. The signal doesn't care who you are. It only cares that you're paying attention. If you're hearing this through a screen, a speaker, a headset, it means the broadcast found another path, another frequency, another doorway. I want to warn you, but the words come out wrong. Softer, friendlier, more inviting, that's how it works. If your radio turns on by itself tonight, don't adjust the volume. Don't try to find the source, just turn it off and walk away. Because once you stay to listen, you don't leave Ravens Creek. Ravens Creek leaves with you. My name is Sophie Lancaster, and this happened during my first solo summer in Canada, in a tiny town called Black Pine. I had just turned 24 and wanted a quiet escape from city life. So I rented a small cabin on the edge of Black Pine Lake, surrounded by endless forests that reflected perfectly in the still water. Locals warned me about the lake, but I laughed it off. I had always loved solitude. The first night was peaceful. The stars mirrored in the water, the soft croak of frogs, and the distant hoot of an owl. I wrote in my journal and thought I was safe. That changed just before midnight. I heard a splash, soft, deliberate, coming from the lake. The water lapped gently against the shore, but there was no wind. Then I heard whispers, like children laughing, faint, echoing across the water. They weren't playful, though. Something about them felt sharp, hungry. I pressed my ear to the cabin door and realized the whispers were calling my name. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was imagining things. But the sounds grew louder, moving closer. I peeked through the cabin window and saw something floating in the lake. At first, I thought it was a log, but it shifted unnaturally, standing upright for a moment before sinking again. I called the property owner, but my phone had no signal. Panic rose as the whispers turned into distinct words. "Come to us, Sophie. Come to us." The voice wasn't human. It was layered, distorted, soft and terrible all at once. I grabbed a flashlight and tried to walk around the cabin to see where the sound was coming from. Every time the light swept over the trees, shadows seemed to twist, forming shapes that mimicked human figures. None of them moved, but I could feel their eyes on me. The lake reflected something darker than the night sky, something waiting just beneath the surface, patient, hungry. By the third night, I wasn't sleeping. Every creak in the cabin, every whisper in the wind, set my heart racing. I started hearing footsteps outside, slow, deliberate, circling the cabin. Sometimes they paused near the windows, as if someone was listening to me breathe. I tried reasoning with myself. Maybe it was raccoons, owls, or branches rubbing against the walls. But deep down, I knew this was something else, something that didn't belong. That night, I decided to record the sounds. I set my phone on the table, capturing the whispers, the faint splashes, the soft taps on the wooden walls. Later, when I played it back, my blood ran cold. The recording wasn't just of sounds, it contained voices, hundreds of them, calling my name, whispering secrets I had never shared. I realized I wasn't just being watched, I was being studied, learned, marked. And the lake was the heart of it all. The next evening, I couldn't resist looking at the lake. The moon reflected off the water, but it wasn't silver. It was black, absorbing the stars. Shapes moved just under the surface, too fast to be fish, too deliberate to be natural. I saw one rise, a pale form, taller than any human, limbs elongated and fluid. Its eyes glowed faintly, fixed on me. It wasn't alone. Behind it, dozens of others mirrored its movements, hovering just below the surface like waiting shadows. When I backed into the cabin, I slammed the door, only to hear a scratching from inside. My journal, lying on the floor, had words I didn't write. "We are patient. We are hungry. We know you." I could feel their presence pressing against the thin walls, the air thick with anticipation. I understood then that the lake wasn't just water. It was a trap. And I had been lured here, alone. By the fifth night, I was terrified to leave the cabin, yet terrified to stay. The whispers became more urgent, repeating my name with impatience. I could feel them moving through the walls, through the floorboards, reaching for me even without touching. I tried to escape. I packed my bag and ran toward my car, flashlight cutting a narrow path through the forest. The trees seemed taller, the shadows stretching like long arms, trying to pull me back. Then I saw them. Figures standing silently between the trunks, motionless, yet radiating intent. When I reached the edge of the lake, I froze. Something surfaced, pale and fluid, lifting its head above water. Its eyes burned with a light that was almost human, but distorted, wrong. It spoke without moving its lips. "You belong to us now." I stumbled back to the cabin, slamming the door behind me. I realized running was useless. They didn't chase. They waited. Always. I barricaded the cabin, stacking furniture against the door. Every creak of the wood sounded like the approach of invisible feet. The whispers escalated, overlapping into a chorus of voices, echoing from the lake and the trees, merging into one terrifying sound that shook the walls. I tried to call for help, but the signal was gone. Even my phone battery drained in minutes. The walls vibrated as if the cabin itself was alive, pulsing in time with their chorus. Then I heard it. A single soft knock at the window. My flashlight revealed nothing, only the reflection of the dark lake behind me. But the knock repeated, slowly, deliberately. I realized they were testing me, patient and intelligent. I could feel it. The lake, the forest, the shadows. They weren't just watching me. They were learning me, timing my fear, feeding on it. If I stayed, I would become part of it. By the seventh night, exhaustion had taken over. I hadn't slept properly in days. My food was gone, my energy drained, but I couldn't leave. Every time I thought about escaping, I could feel them waiting, patient and immovable, just beyond the trees and the water. The whispers had changed. They weren't just calling my name anymore. They were imitating me, speaking my thoughts, mocking my fear. I could hear my own voice pleading, begging, taunting me from all directions. Suddenly, the cabin door shook violently. I bolted to the window. The lake's surface rippled violently, and dozens of pale figures emerged, not swimming, but hovering just above the water. Their eyes glowed faintly, fixed on me. I realized then that they didn't need to touch me. Their presence alone drained me, bending reality around the cabin. Each heartbeat felt like it belonged to them. Each breath pulled me closer to the lake's edge. I tried screaming, but my voice came out distorted, like water rushing through pipes. The whispers responded in kind, forming words I had never spoken aloud. Your fear is ours. Your body is ours. Your voice is ours. I backed into a corner as the shadows from the forest and lake seemed to stretch into the cabin. The air became thick and wet, smelling like the deep water, decayed leaves, and something metallic. I thought about jumping into my car and driving away, but I knew it wouldn't matter. The lake had claimed me the moment I arrived. It didn't need to pull me physically. The fear alone was enough. That night, I finally understood. The lake was alive, ancient and patient. It collected souls slowly, learning each one's habits, each one's voice, each one's terror. And now, I was part of its collection, waiting to feed the next unwary visitor. By the ninth night, I was no longer certain of time or reality. Days and nights blurred into one endless stretch of fear. The whispers had grown louder, forming sentences I couldn't fully understand. They repeated my fears, my regrets, my private thoughts. I tried to leave again. I opened the cabin door and ran toward the car, but the forest seemed alive. Trees bent toward me. Roots reached out like fingers. Shadows moved independently, blocking every path. The lake shimmered unnaturally, and I could see pale faces pressing against the surface, staring at me with hollow eyes. I realized then, the lake didn't need to chase me. Its patience was a trap. Its slow pull, the whispers, the figures, all were designed to break me down. Every step I took, I felt myself sinking, not into water, but into the fear it had grown from me. I stumbled back to the cabin, understanding one terrible truth. The lake had chosen me, and I would never escape. The last night, I accepted it. I lit every candle, barricaded every window, but the air inside the cabin was thick and wet with anticipation. The whispers became a chorus, repeating my name over and over, merging with the sound of the lake's water lapping unnaturally against the shore. I felt something cold brush my hand. I turned. Nothing. Then, slowly, I heard it. The water moving inside the cabin itself. Ripples on the floorboards, forming shapes like human feet, rising toward me. I understand now that the lake doesn't kill quickly. It doesn't need to. It waits. It teaches patience. It consumes fear, learning voices, emotions, weaknesses, leaving only the husk of a person to wander among the shadows, a warning to others. If you ever find yourself alone by Black Pine Lake, remember this: the water is never empty, and sometimes it's already watching you. My name is Ethan Cole, and this happened during a hiking trip through a remote section of the Whispering Pines Forest in northern Canada. I had always loved solitude in the wilderness, but I soon realized that some places aren't meant to be explored alone. The trail started normally. Dense pines, birds calling in the morning, soft moss underfoot. By the second day, the forest felt wrong. Sounds shifted around me, whispers in languages I didn't know. The wind seemed to carry voices calling my name, barely audible but unmistakable. I told myself it was imagination. That afternoon, I came across an abandoned campsite. A small fire pit, cold ashes, a torn backpack. No person in sight. And then I saw the trail markers, freshly carved into the trees. But the symbols weren't like normal markers. They seemed to move if I blinked, rearranging themselves when I looked away. I felt the first twinge of fear. Something was guiding me, or trapping me. As night fell, I tried to set up camp. The air grew colder, heavier, as if the forest itself was pressing down. I heard the whispers again, closer this time, circling me. They weren't just voices. They were impressions of footsteps, of breathing, mimicking my own. I lit a small fire, hoping the light would give me comfort. But shadows moved unnaturally in the corner of my vision. Every time I turned, the shape vanished, leaving only the faint echo of a whisper. You shouldn't be here. I checked my compass. It spun wildly, refusing to point north. The trail I had followed for hours seemed to twist back on itself, overlapping in impossible directions. Trees that had been behind me were now ahead. The forest had become a maze, and it was learning me. I realized then that Whispering Pines wasn't just a forest. It was alive, patient, and hungry for those who dared enter uninvited. By the third night, I was exhausted and terrified. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig made me jump. The whispers were louder now, repeating my every thought, my every fear. They weren't just outside. They seemed to come from the ground, the trees, even the air itself. I tried to follow the trail again, hoping to find the way out. But the markers changed as I walked. Trees shifted slightly, and the path wound back in on itself in ways that defied logic. I began to feel dizzy, my sense of direction failing entirely. Suddenly, I saw something moving through the trees. A figure, tall and dark, gliding silently between trunks. It wasn't human. Its movements were smooth, unnatural, as if it floated on the wind. Every time I blinked, it seemed closer. I froze, realizing that the forest wasn't just alive, it was hunting me. And the trail I thought I was following was leading me deeper into its grasp. I tried calling for help, but my phone showed no signal. Even shouting seemed useless. The sound faded before reaching more than a few feet. I realized the whispers weren't just sounds. They were controlling perception, shaping the forest around me. I stumbled into a small clearing. Moonlight barely pierced the canopy, casting strange, elongated shadows. On the ground were footprints. Not mine, not human, but matching my own in size and shape. They led toward a part of the forest I hadn't seen before, darker and thicker. Something about the footprints made my stomach turn. They were leading me, daring me to follow. And as I hesitated, I heard it. A voice, low and rasping, directly behind me, whispering my name. Come. This is the only way. I didn't want to go. But the forest seemed to push me forward, bending the path and my mind alike. I had no choice but to follow. By the fifth night, exhaustion and fear had dulled my senses, but the forest never relented. The trail twisted around impossibly, trees bending as if alive, branches stretching toward me like fingers. I could hear whispers all around, calling not just my name, but secrets, things I had never told anyone. I stumbled upon an old wooden sign partially hidden by vines. The letters were scratched into the wood. Turn back or stay forever. I laughed nervously, trying to convince myself it was a prank, a trick of the shadows. But the next moment, the ground beneath me seemed to shift. Roots writhed like snakes, cracking and groaning. I tried running, but the path behind me disappeared. The forest had erased it. In front, I saw a dark shape standing perfectly still. It didn't move, but I felt its gaze pressing into my skull. The whispers grew louder, converging into a single voice. You will not leave. Not tonight. I realized the forest didn't just want me lost. It wanted me trapped, aware, terrified. I tried to climb a hill to get a better view, but every slope seemed endless. The trees shifted with every step, blocking paths, bending in impossible angles. I stumbled and fell into a shallow depression filled with fallen leaves, heart hammering. The whispers intensified, now mimicking my own voice, repeating every word I thought, every plea for escape. I realized the forest had learned me. My fears, my thoughts, my patterns. It wasn't just alive, it was aware. I spotted a faint light in the distance. Relief surged through me, thinking it might be another hiker or a ranger station. But as I approached, the light moved, retreating slowly, almost teasing me. Shadows flickered around it, forming humanoid shapes that paused and stared. By then, I understood the truth. The forest didn't allow escape. It never had. It wanted me to follow, to wander endlessly, and the moment I gave in, I became part of its whispers, another voice guiding the next traveler. By the seventh night, I was on the verge of losing my mind. Every tree seemed alive, every shadow a lurking predator. The whispers had become relentless, circling my head, repeating my thoughts, twisting them into something unrecognizable. I couldn't tell where I ended and the forest began. I stumbled into a small clearing, and the faint light I had been chasing revealed something horrifying. Hundreds of footprints surrounded the area, some human, some elongated and unnatural. They formed a spiral leading toward a dense part of the forest I had never seen. The spiral pulsed, almost like it was breathing. A shape appeared in the center of the spiral, a figure taller than any human, dark as the night itself. Its movements were fluid, almost floating above the ground. The whispers converged into a single chilling command. Step inside. Join us. I froze. The forest had drawn me to the center, and I realized with terror that this wasn't a path. It was a trap. I tried to run, but the forest shifted beneath my feet. Trees bent toward me, roots snaking like restraints, whispering louder, closer, sharper. I stumbled and fell into the spiral, landing face first in the cold dirt. The tall figure moved closer, its presence filling the clearing, pressing against my mind. I could hear dozens of voices layered over its own, whispering my fears, mocking my struggle, promising that resistance was pointless. The light I had followed flickered again, and I realized it wasn't guiding me. It was luring me. The spiral seemed endless, folding in on itself, twisting reality until there was no up, no down, only movement toward the figure. I understood then that the forest didn't just trap bodies. It trapped attention. It consumed fear, shaping it into power. And once it had you, it never let go. I wasn't running anymore. I was part of the trap. By the 9th night, I was utterly exhausted, my body trembling, my mind fraying. Every step I took felt like wading through invisible molasses. The whispers had multiplied, echoing from the trees, the ground, even the air around me. They didn't just speak my name anymore. They spoke my thoughts, my regrets, my deepest fears, twisting them into taunts that left me gasping. The spiral of footprints led me to a small pond, perfectly still under the faint moonlight. The water reflected not my own image, but something else. Dozens of pale, elongated faces staring back at me with hollow eyes. They whispered together, forming a chorus of voices that promised the same thing. Stay, or become part of us. I tried to turn away, but the trees blocked every path. Roots twisted into the soil like living barriers, and shadows pressed in from every angle. I realized with crushing clarity that escape was an illusion. The forest didn't just want me lost. It wanted me for its collection, its endless game of fear. The last night, I finally understood the full scope of Whispering Pines. The forest wasn't just alive. It was ancient, patient, and intelligent. It didn't kill quickly. It didn't need to. It trapped, it studied, it fed on fear, bending reality around its victims. I found a hollow tree at the edge of the pond and crawled inside, desperate for safety. The whispers circled, closer than ever, but the hollow offered brief relief. Outside, the spiral of footprints glimmered faintly in the moonlight, moving slowly, as if rearranging themselves for the next traveler. I realized the forest had claimed me, not physically, but mentally. My fear had become part of its essence. My presence now another whisper guiding others. If anyone follows the trail, they will hear it, my voice, luring them deeper, repeating my terror over and over. Whispering Pines is patient. And if you wander too far alone, it's already learning you. My name is Clara Mitchell, and this happened during my first winter working as a caretaker at Frostwood Manor, a crumbling estate in a remote Canadian town. I had answered an ad for seasonal work, expecting cold nights and empty halls, but not the sense that the walls themselves were watching me. The manor sat on a hill, surrounded by dense forests and frozen fields. At first, everything seemed normal. The fireplace roared, the wind howled through broken windows, and the floors creaked like any old house. But soon, I began hearing things that didn't belong to the manor. Footsteps pacing the hallways when no one was there. Soft whispers just out of reach. Doors opening slowly as if beckoning me. The first night, I awoke to a cold draft and the faint smell of smoke, though the fireplace had long gone out. A shadow passed across the hallway outside my room, elongated and human-like, yet completely unnatural. I froze, heart hammering, realizing I wasn't alone. By the second night, the manor had become suffocating. Every room held a chill, even near the fireplaces. The floorboards groaned under invisible weight, I would hear whispers echoing through empty corridors, sometimes repeating my own words. I explored the main hall, a grand room lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Their eyes seemed to follow me, shifting subtly whenever I looked away. In the corner of the hall, a rocking chair moved slowly on its own, creaking with deliberate rhythm. I tried to convince myself it was the wind, the house settling, but my instincts screamed otherwise. The whispers grew louder at night, forming sentences in soft, broken tones. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't stay. And then I saw it. A figure, pale and shadowed, standing at the top of the staircase, watching me. It didn't move when I screamed. It didn't need to. Its presence alone made the air feel heavy, thick with warning. By the third night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every draft of cold air made me jump. The whispers were louder, echoing through the manor's halls, repeating my name, repeating my fears. It was as if the house itself had learned me, tracking my every move. I wandered into the library, hoping to find something, anything, that explained the strange occurrences. Dust-covered books lined the shelves, but one book lay open on the floor. Its pages were filled with handwriting that wasn't mine, words warning of a presence that fed on fear and loneliness. I shivered as a cold gust blew through the room, flipping pages violently, though no windows were open. Then I saw it again. The pale figure standing in the doorway, not moving, just staring. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dim candlelight. I tried to approach, but the floor beneath me groaned as if warning me away. I realized the manor wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and I was trespassing. That night, I decided to investigate the upper floors. The staircase groaned under my weight, echoing through the empty halls. I could feel the presence growing stronger, heavier with every step. The whispers became clearer, almost intelligible. You cannot leave. Stay with us. I entered a bedroom at the end of the hall. The walls were covered in faded wallpaper, peeling like old skin. In the corner, a mirror reflected not my face, but a pale figure standing directly behind me. I spun around. Nothing was there. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, and the temperature dropped. My breath fogged the room. The whispers surrounded me, coming from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. It was no longer just one voice. It was many, layered and overlapping, murmuring secrets I had never told anyone, mocking my fear. I realized then that Frostwood Manor didn't just house ghosts. It collected them, feeding on every emotion, twisting reality until you couldn't tell what was real. By the fifth night, I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. The whispers had grown louder, sharper, like dozens of voices speaking directly into my mind. Every hallway I walked down seemed to stretch endlessly, twisting and bending as if the house itself was shifting around me. I went to check the cellar, hoping to find some explanation. The steps creaked beneath me, and the air grew heavier with every descent. At the bottom, I found old furniture stacked haphazardly, cobwebs thick and suffocating. And in the corner, a shadow moved against the wall, elongating and twisting unnaturally. The whispers were almost chanting now, repeating, "Stay, we are waiting. You belong here." I froze, knowing it wasn't just words. It was a command. The air pressed down on me, cold and heavy, making it hard to breathe. Frostwood Manor didn't just haunt, it controlled. And the longer I stayed, the more it learned how to break me. I tried leaving the cellar, but the stairs seemed to stretch farther than they should, twisting back upon themselves. The whispers followed me, growing louder with every step, overlapping into a chorus of voices I recognized as my own. They mocked me, repeating my private fears, twisting them into commands. I reached the main hall again, only to find the portraits of the manor's past residents had changed. Their eyes now glowed faintly in the candlelight, and their expressions seemed alive, moving subtly, watching me with grim intent. I felt the weight of generations pressing down, judging me, daring me to leave. A cold wind swept through the hall, extinguishing every candle. Shadows surged along the walls, flickering like living smoke. I realized then that Frostwood Manor didn't need to touch me to control me. Its presence alone was enough to trap my mind and my soul. I understood that if I stayed, I would never escape. Not physically and not mentally. By the seventh night, I was barely holding on. Every creak, every groan of the old house sent my heart racing. The shadows seemed thicker, almost physical, twisting and reaching toward me. The whispers were relentless, overlapping voices, mocking me, calling me by name, repeating my thoughts back to me with a cruel twist. I decided to explore the West Wing, a part of the manor I had avoided until now. The floorboards warped under my weight, groaning like the house itself was alive. In the corner of a long hallway, I saw a rocking chair moving slowly, though no wind or hand disturbed it. The shadows in the room seemed to thicken and pulse with anticipation. And then I saw the figure, a pale, elongated shape, standing at the end of the hall. It didn't move, didn't breathe, yet I felt its presence pressing into my mind. I realized the house didn't just haunt me. It studied me, waiting for my fear to reach its peak. That night, I tried to barricade myself in a bedroom, stacking furniture against the door. The air was thick and cold, filled with whispers that seemed to come from inside my skull. I could hear the figure moving through the hall outside, its steps silent yet unavoidable. I approached a mirror, hoping for some sense of reality. The reflection showed me alone, but behind me in the glass, a pale figure leaned close, its eyes hollow, glowing faintly. I spun around. Nothing. But the reflection remained. The portraits on the walls seemed to shift subtly, their eyes following me, their faces twisting into grim smiles. The house had become a maze of terror, bending reality to trap me, to test me, to teach me that it owned every corner, every shadow, every sound. I understood then that Frostwood Manor didn't just haunt bodies. It haunted minds. And the longer I stayed, the more I became part of its eternal collection. By the ninth night, I was barely human. Sleep had abandoned me. Food had lost its taste. Every creak, every whisper, every shadow had become unbearable. The manor wasn't just alive. It was aware of me, reading my thoughts, predicting my movements. I wandered into the grand dining hall, hoping to find some escape route or answer. The long table was set as if a feast were about to begin. Plates covered in frost and shadows. Candles flickered, though no breeze stirred. And then I saw it. The pale figure standing at the far end of the table, elongated and still, its hollow eyes fixed on me. The whispers were deafening now. A chorus of voices overlapping mine, repeating my deepest fears, mocking every attempt to escape. I realized the truth. Frostwood Manor didn't need to touch me. Its patience, its constant observation, and its subtle manipulations were enough to trap me forever. I understood then that leaving would never be an option. The manor had already claimed me, already. The last night, I finally surrendered to the reality of Frostwood Manor. I lit all the remaining candles in the manor, hoping to hold back the darkness. But the shadows only grew heavier, creeping along the walls like liquid smoke. The whispers were now a deafening chorus, echoing in every corner, repeating my name, repeating my fear. I hid in the attic, listening to the figure glide silently through the halls below. Every floorboard, every door, every breath seemed orchestrated by the house itself. I realized then that Frostwood Manor didn't just collect spirits. It trapped awareness, bending minds, and shaping terror over time. As dawn approached, I felt the manor's presence settle over me like a cloak. I was still alive, but no longer free. The whispers promised that I was now part of Frostwood Manor's collection. Another voice to haunt, another story to guide the next visitor into its endless nightmare. If you ever enter Frostwood Manor, remember this: it is always watching and it never forgets. My name is Lucas Grant, and this happened when I decided to explore the abandoned Raven Hollow Asylum, a place long closed after decades of strange deaths and disappearances. I had always been drawn to forgotten places, but nothing prepared me for what awaited inside. The asylum sat on a hill, surrounded by overgrown woods and fog-covered fields. Its windows were shattered, doors hanging from broken hinges. Inside, the air was thick with decay, the faint smell of old antiseptic mixing with something far fouler. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing rusted wheelchairs, scattered patient files, and walls scratched with desperate messages from long ago. I heard the first whisper almost immediately. A soft, raspy voice calling my name, barely audible, echoing from the darkened hallways. I froze, telling myself it was my imagination. But the sound repeated, clearer this time. "Lucas, don't leave." It was then I realized. The asylum wasn't just abandoned. Something remained, watching, waiting. By the second night, I had ventured deeper into the asylum. The hallways stretched endlessly, peeling paint and rusted pipes, creating grotesque shapes in the dim flashlight beam. Shadows clung to the corners, moving ever so slightly when I looked away. I discovered an old ward with rows of rusted beds, sheets yellowed and tattered. The air was icy, and I could see my breath in front of me. Faint scratches and scrawls covered the walls, desperate messages like, "Help, they're coming." I felt a chill run down my spine. Suddenly, a cold hand seemed to brush my shoulder. I spun around. Nothing. But the whispers intensified, echoing down the hall. "You shouldn't be here. It's too late." The walls themselves seemed to pulse with a dark life. The asylum no longer just a building, but an entity intent on keeping me inside. I understood then that Raven Hollow was not empty. It was alive, and I was trespassing. By the third night, I could feel the asylum wrapping itself around me like a living thing. The whispers grew louder, echoing from the walls, the floors, even the ceiling. Each corner I turned seemed to shift, the hallways bending impossibly, like the building itself was rearranging to trap me. I entered the surgical ward, its tiles cracked and stained, trays of rusted instruments scattered across counters. Shadows flickered along the walls, forming grotesque shapes that seemed almost human, yet wrong. Too long, too thin, too distorted. The whispers repeated my name in a chorus of desperate, pleading tones. "Stay. Stay with us." As I moved deeper, I noticed footprints on the dusty floor, small, pale, and blurred, leading into a darkened hallway I hadn't seen before. Something was guiding me, or perhaps toying with me. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but the asylum wouldn't allow it. I was being drawn in, deeper and deeper, until escape became uncertain. That night, the asylum's presence became suffocating. The walls seemed to breathe, pulsing faintly as if alive. Every whisper was now a command, circling inside my skull, urging me forward. Follow. Join. Never leave. I stumbled upon a small therapy room. The chairs were overturned, and patient files lay scattered across the floor. In one corner, a faint glow emanated from a crumpled journal. I picked it up trembling and saw the handwriting of a former patient, desperate and frantic. They watch. They listen. You cannot escape Raven Hollow. Suddenly, a shadow moved across the floor. I froze. The figure was tall and thin, its limbs unnaturally elongated. It didn't walk. It glided silently toward me. The whispers became a scream, echoing through every hallway simultaneously, filling my mind with terror. I realized then that the asylum wasn't just haunted, it was intelligent, patient, and it wanted me. I was no longer an intruder. I was prey. By the fifth night, exhaustion had taken over my body. But fear kept me alert. Every corridor I entered seemed to stretch endlessly, the walls shifting subtly as if alive. The whispers had multiplied, overlapping my own thoughts until I could no longer distinguish between my voice and theirs. I entered the old patient wing, where the beds were rusted and decayed, and the windows were barred with thick metal. Shadows moved independently of any light, forming humanoid shapes that lingered just out of reach. One figure floated near the ceiling, tilting its head to watch me, its eyes dark voids in the dim light. A journal lay open on one of the beds, detailing the last days of a patient. The words were frantic. They are here, always here. They take you if you stray. My heart raced. I understood then that the asylum didn't just trap bodies. It trapped attention, bending reality to feed on fear. I had no choice but to continue deeper, following the faint glow of unknown origin that seemed to beckon me forward. By the sixth night, I was barely holding on to reason. Every floorboard groaned, every pipe echoed like a scream, and the whispers no longer paused. They repeated every fear I had, twisting it into commands that pushed me forward into the asylum's darkest corners. I reached the morgue, a room with rusted tables and cold metal drawers. The temperature plummeted as I stepped inside, my breath freezing in front of me. Shadows slithered across the walls like liquid, forming faces that whispered in unison. You belong here. You cannot leave. I noticed something horrifying. The drawers weren't empty. They held thin, pale, elongated forms that looked almost alive, writhing subtly. The glow I had been following pulsed from one of the forms, as if it were calling me, beckoning me closer. I understood then that Raven Hollow didn't just contain spirits. It was a predator, intelligent and patient, and I had walked directly into its lair. By the seventh night, my fear had solidified into a constant ache in my chest. Every corner I turned seemed to hide something alive, watching me. The whispers had become a chorus, layered and continuous, echoing through the corridors, repeating my name and twisting my memories into threats. I entered the east wing, where the walls were lined with patient doors, most hanging from broken hinges. Behind each door, shadows shifted unnaturally. One door slammed shut on its own, making me jump and spin around, flashlight trembling in my hands. In the far corner, a figure stood, tall, thin, pale, and impossibly still. Its face was featureless, but I felt its gaze cutting into me, probing my thoughts. The whispers converged, forming a single voice. You cannot leave. You belong to us. It wasn't a warning. It was a statement. I realized then that every step I had taken through Raven Hollow had been guided, herded toward this moment. Escape was no longer an option. I tried to move backward, but the hallway seemed to stretch, elongating unnaturally, as if the building itself resisted me. The whispers filled my head, repeating every doubt, every fear I had ever felt. My legs trembled, but I forced myself forward, drawn toward a faint, flickering light at the end of the hall. The figure followed, gliding silently, its presence suffocating, pressing into my mind. Every surface of the asylum pulsed with life. Walls, floors, ceilings, even the scattered debris seemed aware, shifting to block or guide my path. I stumbled into a small chamber, and the light revealed a spiral of shadows on the floor, moving in impossible patterns. The whispers became louder, commanding, "Join us! Join the collection!" I understood then that the asylum was patient, intelligent, and eternal. My fear had been its sustenance from the beginning, and now, at the heart of Raven Hollow, I was completely ensnared. By the 9th night, exhaustion and terror had melded into a constant hum in my mind. Every whisper, every shadow, every creak of the asylum seemed orchestrated to unnerve me completely. The hallways twisted in ways impossible for any building, and I realized the asylum wasn't just a structure. It was a predator, patient and aware, feeding on fear. I reached the central chamber, a room lined with rusted metal cages and old padded cells. Shadows writhed along the walls like living smoke. From one cell, a faint glow pulsed, and I saw forms huddled inside, thin, elongated, pale, and eerily human. They watched me with hollow eyes, their whispers joining the chorus. "You cannot leave. You belong here." My flashlight flickered, and the chamber seemed to stretch into infinite darkness. I realized that my presence had been expected, prepared for. The asylum had studied me, herded me, and now it had me exactly where it wanted. The final night, I understood the full horror of Raven Hollow. I tried to flee, but the hallways looped back on themselves endlessly, and the whispers became a deafening storm in my mind, repeating every fear, every regret, every insecurity I had ever known. I hid in a corner of the chamber, but the forms in the cells shifted closer, their eyes glowing faintly, their elongated limbs pressing against the bars. The asylum's presence was overwhelming, flowing through the walls, the floor, the air. It wasn't just a building. It was a consciousness, patient, eternal, and hungry. I knew then that escape was impossible. Raven Hollow didn't just trap bodies, it trapped minds, folding fear into power, bending reality to its will. I had entered as an intruder and was leaving. As part of its collection, another whisper for the next visitor to hear. If you ever approach Raven Hollow, remember this. It is awake, it is patient, and it never forgets. My name is Ethan Clark, and this happened during a camping trip deep in the remote woods of Whispering Pines, a forest in northern Canada known for its isolation and dark folklore. I'd always loved the solitude of nature, but nothing prepared me for the terror that awaited. We pitched our tents near a frozen creek, the wind rattling the bare trees like skeletal fingers. As night fell, a thick fog rolled in, swallowing the campfire's glow. At first, it was just the normal sounds of the forest, the rustling of branches, distant howls of wildlife. But soon, I began to hear whispers, soft and almost human, carried on the wind. The first whisper was my name. Then another, repeating my fears back to me, as if the forest itself was listening. I froze, realizing that these weren't ordinary sounds. They were deliberate, intelligent, and close. Something in Whispering Pines had noticed us, and it didn't want us there. By the second night, the forest had become suffocating. Every rustle, every snapping twig seemed to follow me. I could feel eyes on us, though the fog obscured any possible source. The whispers grew louder, repeating our names and private thoughts in a voice that sounded almost human, yet wrong. I ventured away from the tents, flashlight cutting through the mist, to check the creek. The snow underfoot was soft and silent, but every step seemed amplified, echoing unnaturally. In the fog, I glimpsed movement. Tall, shadowy figures between the trees, watching, unmoving, yet undeniably aware of me. Then I saw markings on the trees, strange symbols scratched into the bark, fresh and dark, as if warning intruders. The whispers became a chorus. "You don't belong here. Leave or stay forever." I realized that Whispering Pines wasn't just a forest. It was alive, patient, and it hunted with a cunning I had never encountered before. By the third night, the forest had begun to play tricks on my mind. Every shadow seemed alive, twisting and stretching unnaturally. The whispers followed me wherever I went, repeating my thoughts, mocking my fear, promising I could never leave. I felt trapped in an invisible maze, the fog thickening with every step. I wandered toward an old, abandoned ranger cabin I had seen earlier. Its wooden walls were rotting, the windows shattered, but it seemed to offer some shelter. As I approached, I noticed strange footprints in the snow, long, thin, and human-like, but impossibly large. They led around the cabin in circles, as if something or someone was stalking me, never revealing itself fully. Inside the cabin, the air was icy and heavy. Faded drawings and symbols covered the walls, and I could hear whispers bouncing from corner to corner. The forest outside seemed to press against the walls, alive with a presence that had been watching me long before I arrived. That night, the whispers became clearer, almost human. They seemed to speak directly to me. "You cannot leave. You belong here." I tried to ignore them, but every rustle in the trees, every snapping branch echoed their warnings. The forest was alive, breathing, and aware of my presence. I looked out the broken window and saw the shadows moving in unison, gliding silently across the snow-covered ground. They weren't like any animal I had ever seen. Tall, thin, almost skeletal in appearance, their eyes glowed faintly in the fog. I could feel their gaze burning into me, predicting my next move, hurting me, controlling me. Suddenly, the cabin door slammed shut on its own. I lunged to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers swirled around me like a storm, and I realized the forest had no intention of letting me leave. I was not just lost in Whispering Pines, I was being hunted by it. By the fifth night, my fear had grown into a constant ache. Every shadow in the forest seemed to pulse with life, moving just beyond the reach of my flashlight. The whispers were no longer distant. They circled my mind, repeating my fears and twisting them into commands. "Stay. You belong here. Join us." I decided to leave the cabin and find my way back to the creek, hoping that moving would break the forest's grip. But the snow-covered paths had shifted, and familiar landmarks were gone. Trees seemed to lean closer, their bare branches like skeletal hands, and shadows stretched impossibly long, blocking any escape. Then I saw it, an elongated figure, pale and humanoid, gliding silently between the trees. Its eyes glowed faintly in the fog, fixed on me. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't respond. I realized the forest wasn't just alive, it was intelligent, herding me towards something I didn't want to discover. By the sixth night, exhaustion and terror had blurred together. I stumbled through the forest, the snow crunching unnaturally underfoot. Yet my footsteps left no trace. The whispers had grown into a deafening chorus, repeating every memory, every fear, every regret, until I could barely think. I approached a clearing where the moonlight barely touched the ground. In the center, dozens of faintly glowing symbols had been carved into the snow, forming a circle. Shadows moved within the circle, writhing and stretching like living smoke. The elongated figure hovered at the edge, watching, waiting. A cold wind swept through the clearing, and the whispers became a command. "Join us. You cannot leave." My heart pounded as I realized the forest had herded me into its trap. Whispering Pines didn't just disorient travelers, it collected them, slowly breaking their minds and feeding off their fear. I was trapped, and I understood then that my fate was no longer mine to decide. By the seventh night, despair had settled into my bones. Every shadow seemed to breathe, every whisper clawed at my mind. The forest had become a labyrinth of living darkness, shifting subtly as I moved, ensuring I could never find the paths I remembered. I stumbled upon a fallen tree, and beyond it, I saw movement. A gathering of elongated, pale figures, their glowing eyes fixed on me. They didn't walk. They glided, circling me slowly, their whispers combining into a single, chilling voice. "You are ours. You cannot leave." I tried to back away, but the snow seemed to grip my boots, slowing me. The forest was closing in, every tree leaning toward me, the fog thickening, swallowing the moonlight. Panic surged through me as I realized the figures weren't just guarding the forest, they were guiding me, herding me into the center of their trap. Whispering Pines had chosen me, and the realization made my blood run cold. Escape was becoming impossible. I found myself in a small clearing, and the figures had formed a semicircle around me. The glowing symbols in the snow pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat, and the whispers intensified into a deafening roar. The fog swirled violently, twisting the shadows into grotesque, humanoid forms that seemed to stretch into infinity. One figure drifted closer, its elongated limbs brushing the snow, leaving faint trails of frost. I tried to run, but the forest resisted, paths twisting and snow deepening under my feet. The whispers now spoke in my own voice, repeating my thoughts, my fears, even my memories, bending them into commands. Stay forever. Belong. I realized the truth. Whispering Pines didn't just frighten travelers. It claimed them. Its patience was endless, its method subtle yet absolute. And as the figures pressed closer, I understood that the forest had no intention of letting me leave alive. By the ninth night, I was completely consumed by fear. Every step I took, every movement, was anticipated. The whispers had become constant, echoing inside my skull, repeating my name, mocking my desperation, and guiding me deeper into the forest's trap. The fog had thickened to an impenetrable wall, and the pale, elongated figures glided silently around me, their glowing eyes unblinking and cold. I stumbled into a deeper clearing, where the snow was stained with strange, dark markings, forming intricate, circular symbols that seemed almost alive. The figures paused at the edges, watching me, waiting. My heart pounded, and I realized I could no longer trust my senses. Every tree, every shadow, even the wind, felt alive, bending reality to the will of Whispering Pines. The forest didn't just observe me. It controlled me, herding me toward a fate I could not escape. I was no longer merely afraid. I was utterly trapped, a prey being carefully prepared for its ultimate end. The final night was unbearable. I tried to flee, but the forest had become an infinite maze. Paths looping impossibly, the shadows stretching to block every escape. The figures glided silently, encircling me, their presence pressing into my mind with overwhelming force. The whispers had become a deafening chorus, repeating my fears, my failures, and my regrets, until my own thoughts were lost in the cacophony. I fell to my knees in the center of the snow circle, exhausted and terrified. The symbols in the snow glowed brighter, pulsing as if alive, and the figures pressed closer, their cold, hollow gazes fixed upon me. I realized then that the forest didn't just want to frighten travelers. It collected them, bending their minds, breaking their wills, and feeding on their terror for eternity. Whispering pines had claimed me. Escape was no longer possible. I understood that I would remain part of the forest, another whisper for the next unfortunate soul who dared to enter.